Yes, he did. The Axeman of New Orleans did warn the city with a letter. It's one of the strangest and most famous parts of the whole terrifying story. The letter was published in the newspapers. It gave the people of New Orleans a very specific instruction. He told them to play jazz music in their homes on a particular night, and he made a promise. If they played jazz, he would spare them. If they didn't, they might get a visit from his axe. The story of the Axeman is a real one. It happened between 1918 and 1919. A killer was stalking the city of New Orleans. He would break into homes late at night. He rarely used his own weapon. Instead, he would find an axe or a similar tool in the victim's own home. He would use it to commit horrific acts of violence. Then he would slip away into the night, leaving little to no evidence behind. The city was gripped by fear. No one knew who he was or why he was doing it. The attacks seemed to follow a pattern, but it was a loose one. Many of the victims were Italian-American grocers. This led some to believe it was related to the Mafia or the Black Hand, an early form of organized crime that used extortion and violence. But not all the victims fit this profile. Some were not Italian, some were not grocers. The attacks were brutal and seemed to happen without a clear motive. Sometimes a small amount of money or a few trinkets would be taken, but robbery never seemed to be the main reason for the crime. The real goal seemed to be the violence itself. The first widely recognized attack happened in May of 1918. And Joseph and Catherine Maggio, an Italian couple who owned a grocery store, were attacked in their home. They were discovered by Joseph's brothers. The scene was gruesome. The killer had used an axe to strike them. He had cut their throats with a razor. The police found the bloody axe in the bathroom. They also found the razor. It belonged to Joseph Maggio. The killer had left his own bloody clothes at the scene and changed into a fresh suit from Joseph's wardrobe before leaving. One panel of the back door had been chiseled out. This became a signature of the Axeman. He didn't pick locks. He created his own way in, usually by removing a panel from a door. The city was shocked, but the terror was just beginning. A month later, Louis Bassumer and his partner, Harriet Lowe, were attacked. Bassumer was also a grocer. They were found in their apartment behind his store. Both had been struck with an axe. Bassumer survived, but Lowe died from her injuries a few months later. Before she died, she told people she thought Bassumer was a German spy. This led the police down a dead end, but the method of the attack was too similar to the Maggio case to ignore. The chiseled door panel was there again. The fear in the city grew. People started buying new locks for their doors. They started sleeping with guns. The newspapers were filled with stories about the mysterious killer. They called him the Axeman. In August, another attack. A woman named Anna Schneider was pregnant. She woke up to find a dark figure standing over her. He struck her in the face with a lamp. She was found bleeding and unconscious. She survived, and her baby was born healthy a few days later. But she couldn't give the police a clear description of her attacker. He had simply vanished. Just days after the Schneider attack, the Axeman struck again. This time, the victims were Joseph Romano, an elderly man. He was attacked in his home. His nieces heard a commotion and rushed into his room. They saw a man fleeing the scene. He was described as a large, heavy-set man wearing a dark suit and a hat. Romano died from his head injuries. Once again, a panel on the back door had been chiseled out. The police were getting desperate. They had no real suspects. The descriptions of the killer were vague and sometimes contradictory. The motive was a complete mystery. Was it one man? Was it a group? Was it the Mafia? No one knew. And the people of New Orleans lived in a state of constant low-grade terror. Every strange noise at night could be him. Every shadow could be the Axeman waiting with an axe. Then, in the spring of 1919, things got even stranger. The city was already on edge. The attacks had stopped for a few months, but no one believed the killer was gone for good. They were right. In March, he returned. The victims were the Cortimiglia family. They were Italian grocers who lived in a suburb just outside New Orleans. Charles Cortimiglia, his wife Rosie, and their 2-year-old daughter Mary were all attacked with an axe. Charles and Rosie were seriously injured but survived. Their little girl, Mary, was killed instantly. This was the most brutal attack yet. Killing a child horrified the city in a way the other crimes had not. The public demanded action. The police were under immense pressure. The newspapers ran frantic headlines. The Axeman was not just a killer. He was a monster. And it was in this atmosphere of peak terror and outrage that the letter arrived. It was dated March 13th, 1919. Several newspapers in the city, including the Times-Picayune, received a copy. It was supposedly from the Axeman himself. The editors were not sure what to do. Was it a prank? Was it real? Given the climate of fear and the possibility that it was genuine, they decided to publish it. They felt the public had a right to know. The letter was bizarre. It was taunting, arrogant, and filled with a strange kind of supernatural ego. It read like something from a penny dreadful novel, not a confession from a real-life killer. Hottest, hell, March 13th, 1919, esteemed immortal of New Orleans. They have never caught me, and they never will. They have never seen me, for I am invisible, even as the ether that surrounds your earth. I am not a human being, but a spirit and a demon from the hottest hell. I am what you Orleanians and your foolish police call the Axeman. When I see fit, I shall come and claim other victims. I alone know whom they shall be, and I shall leave no clue except my bloody axe, smeared with blood and brains of he whom I have sent below to keep me company. If you wish me to, I shall tell you a little about myself. I am a demon. I like jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the nether regions that every person shall be spared in whose home a jazz band is in full swing at the time I have just mentioned. One thing is certain, and that is that some of your people who do not jazz it on Tuesday night, if there be any, will get the axe. Well, as I am cold and crave the warmth of my native Tartarus, and it is about time I leave your earthly home, I will cease my discourse, hoping that thou wilt publish this, that it may go well with thee. I have been, am, and will be the worst spirit that ever existed, either in fact or realm of fancy. The Axeman, the letter was published, and the city had to decide what to do. The Axeman gave a specific date and time. He said he would pass over the city at 12:15 a.m. on the night of Tuesday, March 19th, and he gave them his one condition for survival. Their homes had to be filled with the sound of jazz music. The reaction was a strange mix of fear and spectacle. On one hand, people were terrified. This was a direct threat from a man who had already proven he was capable of unimaginable violence. No one wanted to be his next victim. On the other hand, the demand was just so strange. Play jazz or die. It sounded like a joke, but nobody was laughing too hard. The bodies were real. The fear was real. So what did New Orleans do? It did exactly what the letter said. The night of March 19th, 1919 was one of the loudest nights in the city's history. New Orleans was already the birthplace of jazz. The music was everywhere. It was in the dance halls, the bars, the brothels of Storyville. But on this night, it was different. The music wasn't just for entertainment. It was a shield, it was a talisman against a demon. Professional musicians were in high demand. Bands played in the big dance halls, and the venues were packed to capacity. People crowded in, not just to dance, but to be in a place that was defiantly full of jazz. They wanted to be in a loud, safe, public space. The parties went on all night long. But it wasn't just the public halls. The music spilled out from private homes all across the city. People who had phonographs played their jazz records with the windows open, turning the volume up as high as it would go. Those who could play an instrument did. Families and neighbors gathered together, making their own music. Pianos were banged on. People sang. Anything to make a sound to prove to the listening demon that they were following his orders. The whole city became one giant, nervous, jazz-filled party. You could walk down any street and hear the sounds of trumpets, clarinets, and trombones pouring out of the windows. It was a surreal scene. A city held hostage by a killer, and their only defense was music. The newspapers wrote about it the next day. They described the city-wide concert. They noted that the dance halls were overflowing. They wrote about the private parties. They also wrote about the fact that no one was attacked. The Axeman kept his word. The night passed without a single murder. Did the jazz music actually save the city? Probably not. The letter was most likely a cruel joke, a way for the killer to terrorize the entire population at once. He wanted to see if he could make the whole city dance for him, and he succeeded. He proved his power not with an axe, but with a pen. He made thousands of people obey his bizarre command out of sheer terror. It was a massive psychological game, and he won. The letter also cemented the Axeman's place in legend. He wasn't just a brutal murderer anymore, he was a character. He was the jazz-loving demon from hell. The story became part of New Orleans folklore. A composer named Joseph John Davila even wrote a song about it shortly after, called The Mysterious Axeman's Jazz Don't Scare Me Papa. The song captured the strange, almost festive fear of that night. But the story didn't end there. The jazz night was not the end of the Axeman's reign. The music may have worked for one night, but the killer was not gone. A few months later, in August of 1919, he struck again. A grocer named Steve Boca was attacked in his home while he slept. A friend who was staying with him heard the noise and found Boca bleeding from his head. Boca survived, but he couldn't remember anything about the attack. The familiar sign was there, a chiseled panel on the back door. The next attack came in September. A young girl named Sarah Lawman was attacked in her home. She was found with severe head injuries and some of her teeth knocked out. She survived, but she too had no memory of her attack. There was no forced entry at the front of the house, but a window had been left open. The police suspected the Axeman had returned. The final murder attributed to the Axeman happened in October of 1919. A grocer named Mike Pepitone was attacked and killed. His wife Esther was sleeping in another room. She heard a struggle and ran to her husband's bedroom. She saw two men running from the room. She couldn't see them clearly. Her husband was dead, struck by an axe. The room was covered in blood. The Pepitone murder is often considered the last act of the Axeman. After that, the attacks simply stopped. Just as mysteriously as he appeared, he vanished. The police never caught him. His identity was never discovered. The case went cold, leaving behind a legacy of fear, death, and one very strange letter. Over the years, many theories have been proposed about who the Axeman was. The most common theory is that the killings were mafia-related. The fact that so many victims were Italian grocers supports this. In that era, the Black Hand would often extort money from business owners. If they refused to pay, violence would follow. Perhaps the Axeman was a hitman for the mob, and his targets were people who had crossed the wrong people. This theory would explain the focus on a specific group of victims, but it doesn't explain everything. Why the bizarre weapon choice using the victim's own axe? Why the strange, almost ritualistic method of entry by chiseling a door panel? And why attack non-Italian victims like Harriet Lowe or Sarah Lawman? If it was a mafia hit, it was a very unusual one. Another theory is that the killer was just a sadistic individual with a personal grudge. Perhaps he had a specific hatred for Italian grocers for some unknown reason. He might have been a business rival or someone who felt cheated by them. This would explain the brutality of the attacks, which seemed to go far beyond what was necessary for a simple robbery or mob hit. The violence felt personal. One of the most compelling suspects to emerge years later was a man named Joseph Momfrey. The story goes that after Mike Pepitone was murdered, his widow, Esther Pepitone, claimed she knew who the killer was. A year after her husband's death, she shot and killed a man named Joseph Momfrey in Los Angeles. She claimed he was the Axeman and that he had been blackmailing and threatening her. Momfrey was a known criminal, and was apparently the leader of a blackmailing ring in New Orleans. Some believe he was the Axeman, and his death at the hands of Esther Pepitone is why the killings stopped. However, there's no concrete evidence to link Momfrey to the other Axeman crimes. It's a tantalizing theory, but it remains unproven. And what about the letter? Who wrote it? Was it really the killer? It's very likely the killer himself did write it. It fit with the theatrical, terror-inducing nature of his crimes. He wasn't just killing people, he was creating a myth around himself. He wanted the fame, he wanted the fear. The letter was the ultimate act of arrogance. He was taunting the police and the entire city, telling them they were powerless to stop him. The choice of jazz is particularly interesting. In 1919, jazz was still new and controversial music. Many of the city's more conservative, older residents saw it as loud, chaotic, and immoral. It was the music of the young, of the brothels, of a changing world they didn't understand or approve of. By forcing the entire city to play jazz, the Axeman might have been enjoying a private joke. He was making the establishment embrace the very thing they despised. He was forcing his will on them in a very public and humiliating way. The letter's claim to be a demon from hell was also a clever psychological tactic. It lifted him out of the realm of a common criminal. It made him a supernatural force, something you couldn't fight with police and guns. How do you lock up a demon? By claiming to be inhuman, he made people feel even more helpless. He became a bogeyman. So, to answer the original question, yes, the Axeman of New Orleans did warn the city with a letter. The Play Jazz or Die Note is a real historical document. It was published, and the city responded exactly as he commanded. It's a rare and bizarre case where a serial killer communicated directly with his potential victims on a mass scale and gave them a specific ritualistic instruction to follow. The letter is perhaps the main reason why the story of the Axeman endures. There have been many unsolved serial killer cases throughout history, but none of them have this strange, almost mythical element at their core. The image of an entire city, terrified for their lives, playing jazz music into the night to appease a murderer is unforgettable. It blurs the line between true crime and dark folklore. The Axeman was a real person. He was a brutal, vicious killer who brought terror to New Orleans. He murdered men, women, and even a small child. The pain and fear he caused were very real, but thanks to his own strange letter, he became something more. He became the Axeman, the demon from hell who loved jazz music. He was never caught, and his identity remains one of the great unsolved mysteries in American crime history. The only thing he left behind was a trail of bodies, and a very strange note. A note that forced the city to choose between jazz and the axe. And for one night, the city chose jazz.